So welcome everybody to another GRIP-Birkman Coaches Cafe. I'm looking forward to a really stimulating dialogue conversation today as we look at this whole subject of what do we do with a client who has all of their symbols in one quadrant. They're all the same color. So we're going to talk through a little bit of that. There'll be just a little bit of a teaching component to it, but by and large, we're going to be in dialogue. So let's just jump right into things now. When we're looking at people who have all of their symbols in the same quadrant, about 25 to 30% of the people will have their diamond and their circle square in the same color. Only about 10% will actually have all of the symbols in the same color. And I don't have enough research data to back this one up, but I can tell you that from my random search through our database, it appears to me that more often than not, if someone has all of their symbols in one quadrant, it tends to be more in the blues. There are more people who will have all of their symbols in the blue than people that have all of them in the others. And as I said, it's only about 10% of the people that have all of the symbols actually in one color. But we're going to see that that can be deceptive because when you're looking at your interests, you know, all of the interests are not one color. And so, and we only have a maximum of 3 interests that can be the same color. And so we'll see how that really is not a very helpful statement just to say, hey, my asterisk is in this quadrant. As you're going to see, there can be some changes to that. So as I mentioned, in my own, just looking through in my research, I haven't run numbers on it, but I can tell you that it certainly appears that most of the time when all of the symbols are in the same color, it tends to be more true of the blues than other people. And if you stop and think about it, I think that makes sense because blue, somebody speak up for me, unmute your mic, help me out now. What are some of the characteristics of the blue color in the Birkman?
Thinking, planning, socially selective, need space to kind of discern things, to come to solutions. There's a handful.
Anybody want anything else to that?
Innovator, generating ideas.
Yeah. So when we think about that thinking creativity that comes out of the blueness from that withdrawing perhaps from the crowds and not necessarily being unsociable, but Jim, you mentioned that selectively sociable with, you know, maybe just 1 or 2 people. But that creativity that comes in with that. Look over at the blue colors of this person's interest, for example, artistic, literary, musical, and you see that they have all of those in the high range, but their blue is not their only high color. So why don't we just dive right in with this person? By the way, if you see what you think might be your particular snapshot, your particular map, I assure you that it could be, but it probably isn't. These are just kind of randomly drawn. But if you see one and you say, hey, that's me, well, fine. If you want to share that with us and talk to us about it from your personal perspective, we will certainly welcome that. But all of these were drawn randomly as we just have some examples for us to look at. So we see this person has their usual style way down deep in the blue, and their stress behavior and their needs not very far from that blue diamond. So I'm going to ask those of you that are on the call, give me some help here. What does that tell us about this person and how they view the world? Looking at just the diamond and the circle square right now.
They'll love to think it through.
Absolutely. All the time, right?
Yes. Even under stress.
Even when they're under stress or not under stress, they still want to have time to think things through.
Might also be hard for them, other people around them to see when they're under stress.
Okay, it might be difficult to, for someone who doesn't know them well, it might be difficult to distinguish when they're in just their usual effective style or when they're in their stress style, right? What might be some keys though to their stress style? When we're looking at them, what might be some indicators to us that they're acting under stress and not in their usual effective style?
Maybe a little quieter.
Yeah. Yeah, they might be quieter, might be a little more withdrawn.
Mhm.
But the biggest thing about the stress behavior is it tends to be a less productive, negative way of getting their needs met, of getting the job done, trying to get things done. Their needs are not being met by other people. And our stress behavior, remember, can be that less effective or negative way of trying to get things done. And so if we see, you know, we may have to look for some other indicators in that person that tell us that this quiet, more withdrawn, more reserved behavior is negative and not the positive usual style.
I think one of the things that happens on this is that they may not see the other perspectives. I don't know if it would be harder for them to see other perspectives because they don't change or interested in other perspectives, but they're definitely going to be in like one spot.
Yeah. And so related to that, thanks, Jessica, for that, because that does play right into what I was saying. So how does this blue person, and you know, usually I will tell folks, let's not talk about blue people, because let's talk about blue behavior, or let's talk about blue usual, because they might have blue usual and they might have green need stress. So, you know, when you say blue people, what are you talking about? But in this particular case, we're talking about a very blue person, aren't we? So how does this very blue person see someone up here with red kind of behavior? How do they see that?
Might see him as an overachiever.
They might see them as hasty and rushed and just acting, going for it without much thought.
I'll just speak from experience. My wife's pretty much in the blue and I'm in the red, so I can answer this question from personal experience. She thinks I am too impulsive. Her question is quite often, don't you want to think about that for a little while?
And for you, Mark, thinking about that for a while might have taken place even as she was making that comment. And you can honestly say, yes, I have. Because the thought process for you was much more rapid, right?
Well, the distance between thinking and acting is way too short for her liking.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way.
So they might see that as ready, fire, aim.
Exactly.
Because it's incomprehensible that you wouldn't want to have more time to think. And because of the need and the stress and the usual behavior being so close together, this person very likely would be looking at other people and saying, what's wrong with them? Because isn't the rest of the world like this too? You know, stop and think about the fact that they answered all of those most people questions. And that's what tells us about their need, the way they answered all of those questions on their Birkman questionnaire about most people. They saw most people as just a little less in this introversion than themselves. They see other people as just a little bit more extroverted than themselves. And maybe even just a little bit more withdrawn to you know, one or two people than they are. So because they are so close together, it's hard for them to see other perspectives. I'm going to come back to this one and another one. Let's just go up here to the exact opposite, this red one. Now, in this case, the interests are not in the same quadrant, but what's most important is where their usual style and their needs are. The needs in the circle, the usual, the diamond. And in this case, how might this person see things a little bit differently? And certainly see them differently than the one that we saw before with the blue pattern.
They probably need to get things done.
Yeah.
And they get really stressed out if things don't get done.
And this is the person that's going to be frustrated in a meeting if they, if it goes too long and too much strategy and they just want to get out of that meeting and go do other things.
Yeah. Talk, talk, talk. There's a job to be done and we know what it is. Let's get to it. And might want to have an agenda, and let's stick to the agenda and let's move on through it quickly. And if conversation seems to be veering off or taking too long, might be jumping onto something else, or might be wanting to multitask and get several things done during the meeting because the meeting's just going too slow. And so, hey, I can knock out a bunch of emails while you guys are talking about this because I already caught it and know exactly where we're going. And I'm just waiting for you guys to catch up. So, but as I said, only about 10% of the people have all of the symbols showing up in the same quadrant. And in this case, the interests show up down here in the yellow. However, that can be a little bit deceptive if we're only looking at the map. You really need to go over here and look at the detail of the interests. What do you see interesting about this person with their detail of the 10 interests?
The green's actually the highest percentage, but that's not reflected in their map. Like it's not in the green, but it's really close to the green.
Okay. They've got this real high social service interest that doesn't show up on the map. And if I only look at the map, I'm going to miss that completely, aren't I? I'm going to pigeonhole that person in the way that we say Birkman doesn't do. And I'm inadvertently going to pigeonhole that person to think that all of their interests have to do with administrative kinds of things and analytical and, procedures. And oops, guess what? When I look over here and I see where their yellows actually are on the 10 percentiles, it's not there. So what do you think that tells us? So talk to me about a hint here. Do you see perhaps a hint of how this person might try to relate to other people in the other quadrants?
Well, this person has such a high in social service and outdoor. If they're not doing it, I mean, it's almost the need level.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And so if you put them in that thing like that, that says a lot about what they're going to need. They're going to need to have some social service, helping people, persuading, selling, and you wouldn't think that from what you see.
Yeah. Now be careful about the persuading part though, because see, he does have an aversion to the persuasion down there with that number 3.
Oh,
3%.
yeah, sorry.
So not the persuading part, but yes, the social service of, wanting to be of service to people. And hey, this could very likely be a person in ministry who says, I feel drawn to offer my services to help out in this community. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to help them get a lot of good stuff done. Right? And yes, there'll be some administrative part to that this person might enjoy. And let's think about the interest as the things they enjoy. And with that keyword, I enjoy doing this, think about how that could help them to relate to some of those other people. Even this blue person in the totally opposite quadrant, he's got a 62 literary, a 57 artistic. Now, let's not try to use music to relate to those people, but might there be a way that he could apply this literary and artistic interest, which is in the solid upper mid range? Might there be a way that this person could use that interest as a way to connect with some of those blue people and to begin to understand some of them? He might enjoy reading enough to say, you don't just rush through the book, you kind of interact with it or something. So how might be some ways that we can leverage the interests as a means of relating to other people? So let's carry that thought over to the next one. Oh, so how are we going to help this person who is yellow, yellow, yellow? And that's only, again, about 10% of the people that have all of them down into that quadrant. How are we going to help them to leverage and communicate with other people? First of all, let's talk about how is this person going to be able to relate, let's say, to the adjacent quadrant of blue? What's the first obvious thing there?
It's so interesting that their top two scores are blue, and yet they're all three of their, I mean, I guess that's interest. That's marking interest is what that's doing, isn't it?
Yep. Yep. And so here's an interesting case. You're right, though, Jim. You're onto something there. The interest shows up in the asterisk shows up in the yellow, but keep in mind that, remember, we have this gradation of intensity. And this person's interests are not totally over here in the corner of the yellow. They are moving in the direction of the blue. And the fact that these two blues are very strong, but then you've also got this lower artistic that kind of pushes away, that kind of repels away from the blue. You've got only two yellow interests, administrative and numerical, and with both of those being this high of 92% both, that strong magnet pulls it down into the yellow to say, yeah, really strong yellow interests. And they have very strong blue interests in literary and musical. And wow, could that be a way for them to relate to the blue people? However, there's another thing that's maybe, for me at least, is just a little bit more obvious than that. Think about the gradation of it and how close this diamond is to the blue. When this person is reading their description of the yellow diamond behavior, they'll read some things in the general description of the yellow, and then what are they going to read over on the right side when they're reading about their diamond? What are they going to see in that description? Not only some yellow stuff, but also what?
Some blue stuff?
Absolutely. They're going to see some blue in that description of that diamond. And so right off the bat, let's not assume that this person can't understand the folks over here in the blue quadrant. They've got some blueness about their own behavior that they're applying. At the same time of that, though, how are they going to relate to the green person up here? Because there's just not much green in this person, is there?
I was just saying that the social service is still right in the middle, but
Yeah.
so if it's probably like a nonprofit or ministry setting, there's a really good chance that the mission of helping people would be where they would relate the best to even green people.
Yeah, maybe so. And to a large degree, you know, from the standpoint of that social service, they are probably going to have to simply say, you know, I just don't get it. And they may have to ask some of these other folks for help to understand those other people and direct help from the other people. And by the way, is the green behavior up here, are they going to have any trouble telling them if they are asked? Probably none at all, finding the right words and just, you hit my button. I'm so glad you asked that. I've been wanting to tell you. Mm-hmm. And off they'll go, won't they? Hold on to that thought still. We're going to bring it back up to the front burner in just a minute, because talking about those green folks, all right, we got solid green behavior, especially in the need. And look at the direction and the distance of movement in this case. So if I only look at their behavior, I'm going to see all of this green behavior. And are interests visible or invisible to us? They're hidden, aren't they? Mm-hmm. So with these hidden interests, man, I hear this person going on and on and on, talking, and they're good team members. They're good group participants. They add a lot to the conversation. They are good with words. And I'm going to think, oh, they must have persuasive kinds of interest, and that's what they want to do. And look at this. By the way, this is a real person that we really can see this pattern. Administrative and numerical, high administrative, high numerical interests. How would we even know about that if we were only looking at their performance, how they are doing the tasks? And yet they have a lot that they can relate to in these yellow people. And I may have actually known someone like this who was a big talker, and he was also a fantastic accountant. And just to talk to him in the interview, you never would have thought that he was a really good CPA. because he had strong interest in that area.
But you may need to ask him specific questions to find out what he's thinking.
Yeah, exactly. Way to go, Mark. If I could, I'd throw you a virtual chocolate right there because, yeah, you're just not going to know this without asking.
Yeah.
What are some of the kinds of questions you might ask this person about their interests?
Well, in one team we found out that the one guy that never spoke up unless he was asked, just the simple question, what do you think about this? Or what do you think about that plan that we've been talking about, or this idea? Sometimes that question has to be voiced.
Yeah. Now with this guy's green behavior, no, he's probably going to speak out with it, isn't he? I mean, he's probably not going to be reluctant to speak out, but he might not necessarily be talking about these kinds of interests.
Yes.
And so, yeah.
But wouldn't that type of individual have a natural interest in what are the facts? I mean, very, very conversational, able to communicate, but then also let's talk about the numbers. Let's talk about the figures. Can you show me these things? Is that how they would show up perhaps in a meeting or not?
Well, there's a good thought, Jim. Very, very possibly. You might hear a lot of technical kinds of things coming out of their language, you know, or when they are talking about the reports, you might hear them talking intelligently about the financial report.
Okay.
I think about someone right now who is very, very, very talkative and very talented at putting together some fantastic reports that the rest of us can understand. And this person can really get into the detail of the numbers. And when they're giving a financial report, it has some really good words going along with it. And it's not like some of the treasurers I have known who sound, you know, like dry, unsweetened, shredded wheat when they are giving you the financial report. This person has some pretty good flowery language to go along with it. So we've seen several of these different kinds of patterns. Yeah, real quickly, here's the opposite of that, by the way. The exact opposite of that one in terms of yellow behaviors, but very strong green interest. And look up here, we never would have known about these blue interests, particularly the literary part. Now, with this person not having any interest above 90%, what does that tell you about their interests?
Not intense.
Yeah, they're not intense. They have multiple interests, none of which are extremely intense. And so they might want to be involved in a number of different things. And that could be a real strength for this person, because even though they've got this very yellow kind of behavior, particularly in their needs, they've got some blueness in their usual style. And look, they've got all four colors above 50%. And so there might be some way they could relate to these other people through their interests in a pretty strong way. Not intensely, not all at once, not for very long periods of time, but they might be able to leverage these interests to help them understand a little bit about the people and those others. And then the same thing could be true of this person. What about this person right here? Now, where is their diamond? It's just about as close to the middle as you can get. And what does that tell you about a diamond that is that close to the middle?
Can easily step over into any one of the other quadrants.
Yeah. They can operate in all worlds, can't they?
Yeah.
And so again, all their numbers, all their symbols are in the blue. They line up in the blue, and yet they can relate to all of the quadrants. And as far as their own needs, some pretty heavy greenness about their blue stress and needs. And then look at their interest over here. It plots on the blue very next to the green, but look, it's pretty solidly blue plus the social service thing that pulls it on up. And so the biggest lesson from all of this is to say we need to be careful not to just characterize people as being blue, yellow, red, or green. That alone does not adequately describe them. And if we're not careful, we will stereotype them, we will pigeonhole them. That's why we need to keep asking good coaching questions from these people. When you get to the narrative in the report and you let the report speak for itself, and then when you can ask simple questions like, tell me about a time when, or tell me about how this works for you. Tell me about, hey, this strong mixture of blue and green in your needs. Sometimes it seems you've got this blue kind of behavior. Sometimes you've got this green kind of behavior that you want from other people. How do other people know what you want or need from them? And even, hey, you can operate in all of the worlds. Could that sometimes be confusing to people because they're not sure if you're coming out of a blue kind of thing, yellow, green, yellow, red, and it's just, it can be one or the other. You don't seem to want to do the same thing the same way all the time. Talk to me about that. How can that be a strength for you? How can it sometimes perhaps be a liability? How could other people maybe sometimes misunderstand you? And what can you do to better understand them? How do you leverage all of that? Now, there's one more thing that we've got to throw into the mix. I've been kind of concentrating on using their nearness to the other color as an advantage, a strength that they can pull on, a hidden strength. I've been talking about how their hidden interests can be another hidden strength. And if we look at that, that can be a way for them to relate to other people in the other colors, the other quadrants. But what about the elusive dotted diamond? If we leave their gifts out of the mix, we miss an important part of their now sanctified personality. We really do need to consider the direction that the different gifts can pull in as they draw this person to another type of behavior that can only be explained by their spiritual gifts. And so, the person with this strong, all their usual stress and needs down here in the blue might have a gift of evangelism that pulls them way up toward the red to much more extroverted behavior. Or how the person who has a lot of yellowness about them may also have the leadership gift that pulls them up sometimes to be more extroverted and much more people-oriented. How the person with this greenness that we saw that had the very strong yellow behaviors, how they might also have some giftedness in administration that could pull them down here to some yellow kind of behavior. And on we can go. And so just that thing of, if you don't explore the gifts with them to see how their gifts enhance and or alter their behavior, you're missing a very important part of who this person really is. Any thoughts you want to add to that? Or any particular challenge that you might have met with this same kind of thing of having the symbols in the same color in the same quadrant?
Okay, but so based upon what you just said and looking at this particular individual, so how would you coach them with this understanding of their giftedness? How would you coach them with that tool?
Yeah, especially in the team. I have seen a number of times where we have in church organizations and mission organizations particularly, where we have looked at a person's performance and we have given them job assignments based on their past performance. This person has done a particular type of job very well, and so we move them up in the organization to another job with more responsibilities, and that field where they have shown they can perform with excellence. And I have seen a number of people who have become increasingly less satisfied with their work, with their job, with their calling, because they feel that they really aren't maximizing their giftedness. And they many times are not able to, if they're not seeing their interests being fulfilled and they're not exercising their gifts, that can lead to a very frustrated person. Yes, I can do this job. I can do it very well. That doesn't mean I like it. That doesn't mean I get fulfillment from it. That doesn't mean I feel a sense of purpose. And that doesn't mean I get joy or that I even see fruit coming from that. I may not be feeling fruitful because I'm not able to maximize my giftedness. And so this person that might have the very, let's say this person that might have very blue usual kind of behavior, and let's say they do have the gift of evangelism, but they're always put on the strategic planning committee because they are so thoughtful and they have such good reflection and thought and artistic things that they can do to add to the strategic plan perhaps, but they aren't able to get out and really do the one-on-one kind of evangelism that they want to do of building those relationships for people that become fruitful very rapidly. That could be a very frustrated person. Does that help at all, Jim?
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to ask them about how are you exercising your gift? Now, also I want to keep in mind that many times we have people who say, I'm thinking of a very, very gifted administrator person who was also an excellent teacher and a good preaching pastor. He was not a very pastoral person. And so for a while, he tried pastoring a church, which was okay, but he just realized he really didn't have the pastoral gifts. He could do the preaching thing, but his real gift was in administration. And he loved to do the administrative things. And so fortunately, he had a friend that saw that in him who offered him a position as an administrative pastor for a larger church. And part of the deal was he got to preach. In fact, ultimately, he became the most called upon substitute preacher whenever the pastor, the senior pastor, was not able to be there, not able to be in the pulpit. And the people of that church loved to hear this guy preach. It was like, he's preaching today, and it's like, oh, we knew the pastor wasn't going to be here, but Brian's going to be preaching, and so we're going to be there on that Sunday because they just loved his preaching. Not to the extent they wanted him to be the senior pastor. It was like, this is kind of, a treat that we get once in a while. And we're looking forward to the treat when he's going to preach. And he was really, really good at the administration thing of looking over the finances and over the administration of the personnel. He was just an excellent administrative leader that way. So he could do those skills. Where was his real giftedness? To be real honest, I'm not sure, but I know that he seemed to be a very fulfilled person in getting to do both of those things, that he got to do the preaching part that comes from teaching and the proclamation of the word. And he also got to do the administrative things where he was very strong. I'm not sure I could distinguish between which was his giftedness and which was his interest. With his strengths. I'd have to talk to him about that. I haven't had that chance.
Barry, this discussion has helped me think about a couple that I did the GRIP-Birkman for recently, who their Birkman maps are almost identical. I mean, virtually identical. The blue diamond, the diamond's in the blue in almost the same spot. The circle squares in the blue, almost the same spot, and their interest is in the red, almost the same spot. And that was really interesting to talk about. But as we were talking about this and how important the interests are, the detailed of the interests are to the discussion of, when they have a cluster of things in a quadrant, which they both do, they have two things in the blue. and just looking at their interests, their detail interests are they have some similarities, but there's a lot of differences in there. And it has sparked me to maybe reach out to them again and suggest maybe sitting down with that interest page in front of them and talk about what that, while the map shows that they're very similar, the interest detail shows how they're different from one another. And
Yeah.
I think that would provoke a good discussion.
I'm sure it would. I'm sure it would, Stephen, because the truth of the matter is, even though our maps may look very similar, we are still very much unique individuals. And I'm sure that they find their opportunity to have some differences of opinion and some difference of interests, one wanting to go one way, one wanting to go another way sometime when you dig down into the details of that.
The other thing I'd want to look at, Larry, is as far as their dotted diamond is concerned, I want to know what their top gifts are.
Yeah.
And let them tell me where that takes their diamond.
Yeah. Yeah. Because there again, great, Mark. That's another place where I'm sure it draws them in some different areas. They have different interests. Now, from the standpoint of their outlook on the world, they probably, no, I shouldn't use the word probable there. I should say quite possibly they could look and say, hey, both of us are in agreement here. Why don't other people see it the same way we see it? And when they get off together at a meeting and go to their hotel room at night, they might say, why can't those folks just see this? To them, the way they see it is probably the way they expect other people to see it as well. They might follow my geometry teacher's rule that said, 2 points establish a straight line. And so the two of us are in agreement that this is the way the line needs to go. And why doesn't everybody else toe the same line that we're following here?
Larry, the other difficulty in looking at if every symbol is in the same quadrant or in a similar spot, you may assume what you see is what you get. But that may not be true. And again, a reason to ask good questions.
Yeah. Always ask questions. If I can tell you from experience that you get into trouble when you assume something and you don't ask. So always ask, don't assume. Assess rather than assume. And then ask the questions to let them tell you how that's working for them. Thank you for that, Mark, because that is absolutely, absolutely always true. That's part of the reason we like to be coaches. We're not just counselors or consultants, and we're not interpreters of the report. We are coaches to help them understand how they have answered the questions. That gives us an insight into how they see the world and how they relate to other people and how to help them relate to those other people in a more productive, unifying kind of way.
I have a question for you.
Yeah, Jim, please.
When you're coaching and you're there because you've been asked to come to this organization or this church, and I would imagine if somebody has kind of three of their personality markers, four of those personality markers in one area, it's kind of like what you talked about with the executive pastor, that he found a better fit for himself. How do you delineate your coaching around, on one side, helping that individual be a better team player and understand and relate, do better work, and also, hey, you might be a little happier if you were in a different position, like your environment somewhat needs to change a little bit. How do you do that?
Wow. Yeah. I worked with early on, not long after we began using GRIP-Birkman. I did a team build with a church staff, the pastor asked us to come and do this with them. In fact, they were one of our very, very first groups. He wanted to be our test pilot group. And he said, I think this will help us. It'll help me. Come do this. So we came in and we did this beginning of the team build. And in the very first break, the very first morning, he pulled me aside and he said, this is just fantastic. I already know which 2 staff members I need to fire. And I almost had a heart attack. It's like, no, man, you have totally, completely missed the purpose of this, you know. And I spent the rest of the time, every break, trying to convince him. I came back and had several sessions with him saying, look, here's what you need to do. You know, you need to be mentoring these people. You need to be shepherding them. You need to be helping them to be more productive. And what are you doing in your stewardship of this relationship with them? I mean, I poured it all out on him, everything. And to be real honest, he'd already made up his mind. I think he'd really made up his mind before they ever even came to the team build. But I keep looking back to that and I say, sure enough, within about 6 months, 2 of the guys had left. There was a pretty big fuss over one of them leaving. And then within about another 6 months, the pastor himself was gone. So he left a mess there. And I felt like an absolute total failure in my team building with that group. Funny thing is, one of those guys that was one of the staff people that left saw me a couple of years later and he said, hey, you still doing that GRIP-Birkman thing? I said, yeah. He said, you need to come do that at my church. This would be just fantastic at my church. And I'm thinking, I can't believe that he said that. You know, the truth of the matter is he felt like he got out of a toxic situation as a result of that. And so I give him that. But what I wish I could have done with that pastor would have been to help that pastor see that maybe he needed to do some shifting around of people. He had a couple of guys on that team that probably needed to swap job description. And that if just 2 or 3 of those people had done that, their team would have been very, very different. I have actually been in a team build where while we were there present, a couple of guys started talking about, yeah, I've got this interest and I'm just not having an opportunity to find expression for that. And someone else says, well, that's a shame because I'm having to do a job that's exactly related to that. And I don't get any joy out of this at all anymore. And they were just really, really honest with each other. And they said, wouldn't it be great if we could, make some changes in our job descriptions? And the team leader says, why not? Let's do it. And, it's like, you mean we can do it right now, right here? Sure, why not? And I mean, they just took a big pause. They got off together. They said, hey, if I could swap this, this, and this, I could swap this, this, and this. And they did some shifting around and everybody was happy. And suddenly they moved to a whole new level of performance and of unity in their team as they did something like that. I've seen that happen a couple of times, maybe 3. I had another experience with a team of just 2 who sat down and they said, let's look at everything that we've got to do in our task assignment. So they listed all of the tasks that they could think of that they have to get done. And they made 3 columns. So each of them, they had a column that was love it, can do it, hate it. And so they went through with all of their assignments and checked all those off. And then they compared it. And it was really interesting how many things, one person said, I love it. The other person had it in the can do it or the hate it column. And there were a few things that they both loved. And the team leader of the 2 said, okay, I'll have to make sure that you get a chance to do some of this. I won't do all of this myself. I'll make sure that you get a chance to do some of this, but you're going to have to let me do at least some of it too. Agreed. So then how can we look at the can do things to be sure that maybe we've got that evened out? And now let's look at the hate it. And for the hate it things that both of them said we hate it, again, he said, I wish I could say that I'll take all of this, but if I do, it'll burn me out. And the other person said, no, I don't want you to do that. So how about if I take this one? And how about if I take this one? And they kind of divvied it out. And after about an hour and a half, they had it all worked out and they looked at it and said, we're satisfied with this. We can live with this. This fits us as a 65-35 mix. Neither of us has to spend more than 35% of our time doing things that we really don't want to do. And by the way, we might start looking for some other team members that can help us with that other stuff. So you can work it that way too. From again, what if we looked more at interests and giftedness and less at experience for the assignment of people? Wouldn't that be fantastic? Just keep in mind, you don't have to be the expert. You just need to be a good asker of questions. And if you'll use that powerful tool of asking good questions, you'll guide them to come to their discovery of what God wants them to do and how he wants them to do it. And we'll see some really, really great things happening in the body being built up. So once again, I'm going to say thank you for joining us for this cafe. I hope this discussion has been helpful to you. You're always welcome, very welcome to contact me or any other of our team members or your trainers that you have been working with. Feel free to contact us when you have some of those difficult profiles that you're just not sure how to approach that. We're always happy, or even just with one of your colleagues, if you want to get together with a cohort group or a peer coaching group to share with each other some of the things that you're discovering as we help one another to build the body of Christ up so that we can see the body coming to better unity. And as a result of that, we know that more people are going to know Jesus. Thanks again, folks. Bye-bye.